Hello everyone, welcome back to Talking History. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you all keeping well. My name's Liz, and for anyone new here, I do exactly as it's called. I talk all about history. Oh, I haven't said that for a while. So, before we get any further into today's video, I just want to apologise for my little absence. Unfortunately, I caught COVID again. Well, for the second time. The first time was at the very beginning of the pandemic, and I was quite poorly. I was off work for 6 weeks. So, and as soon as I started to feel a bit, I've had colds in the past, and I've always tested, always been negative, but I was actually messaging someone from work, and they said that a couple of our residents had actually tested positive, and she's like, just test yourself, just to be sure. Because at first I thought I had a tummy bug. So I thought, because I've been throwing up since like 4 o'clock in the morning. So I thought, well, let's just test. And I'd done a test, and there it was, clear as day. So, yeah. So, because of the work I do, I'm a support worker. I work with vulnerable adults, so I immediately had to isolate for 5 days, and because I was showing symptoms, so I needed to isolate. And also, I isolated myself from certain members of my family because even though things have eased a lot, I just, for my own peace of mind, I wanted to distance myself from them, so I wasn't putting them at risk, as they are a bit poorly. So yes, but anyway, I tested positive on the Wednesday, and I was negative by the Sunday. But even though it was short, the first couple of days I was really rough, and then after that it just turned into like a heavy cold. And then after that, the week after that, so I tested negative on the Sunday, and then the week after that, it was everyone's birthday. I mean, everyone's. I hate July for birthdays. Absolutely hate it. My husband and my brother share the same birthday, and then 2 days later, it was my father's birthday. So the first week I was too ill to film, and the second week I had no time to film. So it's just how it happened. But anyway, I'm all well now. I'm all negative. I'm back at work tonight. Actually, as I'm filming this video, I'll be back at work tonight. So, anyway, how have you all been? I hope you all been keeping okay. I'm rambling a little bit. It's been a while since I've filmed, so but it feels good to get back to filming again. I really missed it, and I really missed talking to you guys. So, shut up rambling. Let's get into the video. So, the last video I filmed was of King Henry II. It was the first video, and I did say in the first video that it's going to be one of several because so much happened, and you couldn't make it up. It is unreal. So I want to make sure I get everything in there, so it will be done in several parts. So the Plantagenets period is going to be a long one, but saying that it did go on for 300 years. So yeah. Anyway, I need to calm. I need to breathe because I'm rambling and I'm going too fast. So today's video is part 2. So I will link the first one somewhere for you to go and find it in case you haven't seen that yet. Because if you watch this one first before that one, this one won't make an awful lot of sense. And it's almost like joining a movie halfway through and they're like, what's going on? So yeah, watch that one first and then come back and watch this one. So enjoy the video. I'm going to shut up rambling. Enjoy. Thomas Becket was now Archbishop of Canterbury, and becoming Archbishop basically meant that he outranked every other churchman except the Pope. Excuse me, sorry. And Becket was in control of the church and state, so whenever King Henry or Eleanor was away, but Becket, he was feeling inadequate as Henry's archbishop. He was an outsider, and he became quite anxious about his new status. So he felt that he had to prove not only himself, but also to everyone everywhere he went. And this had caused a sudden change in Becket's outlook, and his whole attitude changed, completely changed. And the result was that it changed his relationship with Henry forever. Becket began distancing himself from royal policy from the moment he became Archbishop, and the very first thing he did was to resign from his chancellorship, as he stated that he wasn't fit for both positions. Becket began fighting over church lands with magnates and barons, and Becket began doing everything Henry didn't want or expect. From then on, Becket would become disagreeable to everything Henry wanted. Henry had tolerated Becket's change from loyal crown enforcer to a very unpredictable defender of the church, and this happened overnight. In Becket's mind, he was doing everything to be the perfect model of an Archbishop of Canterbury, which was the exact opposite to what Henry wanted. Henry basically wanted a corrupt and pliable archbishop who would do everything and anything Henry wanted at a click of his fingers. In January 1163, Henry wanted to implement a new legal and governmental reforms that he believed were important to restore law and order. The programs of reforms that Henry wanted to bring to England later in 1164 is known as the Constitution of Clarendon, and it's one of the most famous in English history. The Constitution of Clarendon was the new English laws that designed by Henry to basically give the power of the crown over the church. Now, the church clerks couldn't be tried or punished for crimes at all in royal court. They could only go before the church court. Now, church courts could only impose punishments up to imprisonment and flogging. But who exactly was a clerk? So a clerk was anyone with any status or post within the church, however minor it may have been. And at that time, it was around 20%. That was a lot of people who were immune from prosecution for serious crimes such as murder and rape. Henry wanted them to face the full penalty of royal law, meaning that they could be mutilated or even executed for those offences. Henry wanted more control over the church. Now, straight away, instead of helping to get those new laws pushed through, Becket began resisting them. He stated that the independence of the church was at risk. In July 1163, Henry and Thomas began to clash, first in private, and then they had a full-blown public argument. Within weeks, things had gotten so much worse. Henry removed his eldest son, the young Henry, or as I called him, Henry Jr., from Becket's residence. He also began confiscating, is that the right word? Removing Becket's properties. Henry wanted Becket out of his life completely. Now, Becket, Henry felt that Becket had failed him, and let's face it, basically Henry was embarrassed. He had egg on his face. Everyone told him not to have Becket as Archbishop. He didn't listen. And everyone was too scared going, told you so. No one really had the guts to say that. So, but the problem was, it wasn't going to be easy to get rid of Becket, as Becket was powerful within his own right. He was the Archbishop of Canterbury. So Henry had to tread very carefully, and he got a little bit sneaky. So in 1164, he sent his men on a witch hunt. They went through all of the records as Becket's time as Chancellor, looking for anything incriminating, the slightest little bit, to charge him with crimes, and they found it. In October 1164, in Northampton Castle, Henry held a trial. A council was made up of barons and bishops, and in the dock was none other than Thomas Becket. Becket was put on trial for corruption, embezzlement, and misconduct in public, and whatever else the king's officials could actually make up on the spot. Becket was going to be ruined unless he did something drastic. Now, Becket was in court for 6 days, and the charges just kept piling up and getting more and more severe with each one. And Henry is constantly there urging for more punishments to be laid on Becket, and Becket had no warning of what the questions was going to be. He had no paperwork there to help him, and Henry is being as vindictive as he can, as Henry's goal is to get Becket to resign as Archbishop. So the jury passes a sentence over Becket, but unfortunately the records aren't very clear. Becket wasn't thrown into a dungeon immediately. His sentence, after his sentence is passed, he leaves for his place in Northampton, where he spent his last night of freedom. So in the middle of the night, he and 3 companions dressed as monks, and they left. They were on the run for the next 2 weeks, only travelling by night. And on the 2nd of November, they get to Sandwich in Kent. They hire a boat, and that boat takes Becket to France, where he seeks refuge. And Becket would not return to England for nearly 5 years. In England, Henry just got on with things, even though he was, let's face it, he was still probably annoyed at his former best friend. But Henry gave the duties of Chancellor, although not the title, to Geoffrey Rodell. He also gave Becket's old post as Archdeacon of Canterbury. In September 1167, King Henry's mother, Empress Matilda, died, and she was aged 65. Also in 1167, Eleanor, who was now 43, gave birth to what would be her last child. They named him John. Henry and Eleanor now had 7 children, 4 boys and 3 girls. Those 7 children would go on to create the Plantagenet Empire as we know it. And Henry had all of their futures planned out. In 1168, Henry had betrothed his eldest daughter, Matilda, to Henry the Lion, Duke of Saxony and Bavaria, recreating the link between England and Germany once again. In 1162 and 1163, Henry's eldest surviving son, Henry Jr., had received the homage of the barons and the Scottish king and the princes of Wales. Henry's plans of having his son crowned as king designate had been pushed to one side due to the fallout with Thomas Becket. And as a Archbishop of Canterbury was the only one who could crown an English king. So Henry made it very clear that it was his wish for his son to grow up and to govern all of England, Normandy and Anjou, which meant that the young Henry would be ruling the majority of his father's lands. By 1168, those lands had included the full Duchy of Brittany. After 10 years of pressure, Henry had finally succeeded in having his son, Geoffrey, betrothed to Constance, the daughter of Conan IV, Duke of Brittany. He then forced the Duke to abdicate, giving him the earldom of Richmond to retire. Henry then took control of Brittany in Geoffrey's name. Henry's second son, Richard, would inherit his mother's lands of Aquitaine and Poitou. I hope I pronounced that right. Out of all of their children, Richard was the closest to their mother, and Eleanor had longed to return to Aquitaine and rule as the rightful Duchess. King Louis had also had ambitions to hold on to Aquitaine since it was ripped out of his hands when Eleanor married Henry. So Henry made the proposal for Richard to marry King Louis's daughter Alice, who was born in 1160. This was put towards Louis at a conference in January 1169, and it would be at that conference where Henry and Thomas Becket would come face to face for the first time since Becket left England. And just like before, things never stayed civil for too long. Henry and Thomas soon began bickering, and Henry flared up in anger and accused Becket of being proud and haughty and being ungrateful. Even Louis seemed tired of Becket. He actually said to him, "Lord Archbishop, do you wish to be more than a saint?" Henry and Becket, they tried again in another reconciliation in November 1169, and that also failed. So in June 1170, Henry had enough of waiting and he chose to act incredibly boldly. Henry and his eldest son, Henry Jr., who was now 15, travelled to England along with Norman bishops. They went to Westminster Abbey, where he had his son anointed as King Rex Designatus by the Archbishop of York. The ceremony was witnessed by 10 other bishops. When Becket was informed, he was furious. Only an Archbishop of Canterbury can anoint a king. Becket crossed over to England on the 30th of November 1170 with the intention to discipline the bishops that were involved at the coronation. On Christmas Day at Canterbury Cathedral, Thomas Becket excommunicated almost everyone he could remember that he thought had wronged him. He then announced these severe sentences to those who had taken part in the coronation. Becket had papers from the excommunicating 3 senior English bishops who had stayed loyal to Henry after Thomas's sermon. Becket realised that he now may have gone a little bit too far, as this would soon reach Henry. Thomas is so certain that something will actually happen to him that he's actually saying goodbye to his friends, and he's sending his most loyal servants away for their own safety. Becket's slandering had reached Henry whilst he was in Normandy at his Christmas court. When Henry received the news, he uttered those now infamous words known to history. What miserable drones and traitors have I nurtured and promoted in my household, to let their lord be treated with such shameful contempt by a low-born clerk. Now this has often been changed to, would no one rid me of this troublesome priest? After Henry's shouts, those infamous words, Henry had instructed some of his men to travel to England to actually reason with Becket and arrest him if they needed to. But at that court, there were 4 men who decided to go to England on their own mission ahead of the other men that Henry had just sent. Those 4 men were Reginald Fitzhurst, William de Tracy, Hugh de Morville, and Richard Brito, all loyal members to Henry. They travelled to England and headed straight to Canterbury Cathedral. They arrived around 2 p.m. on the 29th of December. The Archbishop and his colleagues were relaxing in his chambers. The cathedral, it is, if anyone's been to Canterbury Cathedral, it is a magnificent piece of architecture. It is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And it isn't just one massive cathedral. It's actually a huge complex. It has living quarters, communal dining rooms, libraries and offices. And it's also one of the holiest places in England at that point. The cathedral, at that time, the cathedral was already 500 years old. But that didn't mean a thing to those 4 angry knights who were forcing their way in. They quickly find their way to Becket's rooms. There's panic among his advisors, but Becket, he remains calm. He doesn't even get up to greet them. And when the knights begin shouting all of his wrongs that he had done to their king, Becket argues back. The shouting match continues, and then employees of the cathedral begin pushing their way into the room. The knights storm out of the room. Becket's advisors are quickly trying to get him out of his chambers into the main building of the cathedral, where Becket should be safe from violence. Holy places like this should be for sanctuary. But those 4 angry knights, they catch up with Becket. They don't care about sanctuary. They demand that one last time that Becket withdraws his excommunication of the English bishops, and again Becket refuses. Reginald Fitzhurst tries to arrest him and actually tries to stick him on William de Tracy's shoulders to be carried out. Chaos is erupting again. Becket struggles, and in the confusion, the knights pull out their swords and lay into Becket. The first sword swing takes off the top of Becket's head. He just had enough time to commend his soul to God. And Becket's on the floor. The blows from the swords, they keep coming in thick and fast. And finally, Brito runs the sword through him. Now suddenly a fifth man called Hugh the de Horsey, I think that's right, smears Becket's brains into the cathedral floor. The knights flee the cathedral. Becket's friends, his monks, bishops, all probably utterly terrorized and terrified by what they had just witnessed. They begin cleaning up. They put Becket's body into a marbled tomb, but there's no funeral. They must have been completely traumatized. Some would go on to write about Becket, about his life in a tribute. Within hours, news spread of Becket's murder. The Archbishop had been murdered in his own cathedral by men acting on behalf of King Henry. When Henry is informed, he's horrified and he's destroyed. Henry knows that he is in big trouble. He's gone from the most powerful man to be the most despised. The whole of Europe is in shock. It was said that Pope Alexander refused to speak to any Englishman for a week after Thomas's murder, and he was ready to excommunicate Henry. Henry fled to Ireland. He landed at Waterford in October 1171. He stayed there until the following year, where he would be proclaimed as Lord of Ireland. There you have it. There's his massive fall from grace. And I will do a video on Thomas Becket that will be coming up, don't worry. And I will be doing further videos. If you'd like me to do a video, do a more in-depth bit of the Constitution of Clarendon, then let me know if you'd like me to do that, because it is a very, dare I say, interesting document. But anyway, so let me know if you'd like me to do that, and please do like and subscribe. Hit that big subscribe button, hit like, because it gets YouTube to know that you like me. And just keep being you, because you're all bloody amazing. You really, really are. And I love spreading my passion of history to everyone. And even if you're not a big history buff, even if you're not a bit of a nerd like me, but sometimes it's always, I personally think it's always good to learn something new anyway, but that's just me. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. Please do like and subscribe and share, and keep being you, because you're all bloody wonderful. And I will see you all for the next one. Take care.